Welcome back, Agent. Mystic Archive Japan begins analysis.
The sea was quiet that evening. A cool wind drifted across the waters of Den-no-Ura, carrying with it memories older than any living soul. Long ago, this sea had witnessed a terrible battle. Warriors had shouted beneath dark skies. Ships had collided upon crashing waves. Steel had struck steel. And when the battle ended, thousands disappeared beneath the water. The sea swallowed banners. The sea swallowed armor. The sea swallowed dreams. But according to the people who lived nearby, the sea had never forgotten. Even now, they said, the spirits of the fallen remained beneath the waves, waiting, listening, remembering. Near that haunted shoreline stood a small temple. Its wooden halls faced the ocean. Its lanterns glowed softly through the night. And inside lived a blind musician named Hoichi. Hoichi had never seen the world. He had never seen the color of the sky. He had never seen the face of another person. Yet his ears heard everything. He listened to the wind moving through pine trees. He listened to distant waves striking the shore. He listened to insects singing beneath the summer moon. And above all else, he listened to music. From childhood, Hoichi had studied the biwa. His fingers moved across its strings with remarkable skill. People traveled from distant villages to hear him perform. They said his music could bring tears to the eyes of even the strongest warrior. When Hoichi sang stories of ancient battles, listeners felt as though they stood upon the battlefield themselves. His gift was extraordinary. And his greatest performance told the story of the Heike clan. Many centuries before Hoichi's birth, the Heike clan ruled Japan with power and influence. Their banners flew across the land. Their ships controlled the seas. Their wealth seemed endless. Yet all things change. As the years passed, another clan rose against them. War spread across the country. Battle followed battle. Victory turned into defeat. And eventually the Heike were forced into one final confrontation. The Battle of Den-no-Ura. A battle that would decide the future of a nation. The morning of the battle arrived beneath gray skies. Hundreds of ships gathered upon the sea. Warriors tightened their armor. Commanders shouted orders. The waves carried both hope and fear. For hours the battle raged. Arrows darkened the sky. Blades flashed beneath the sun. Men fought for honor. Men fought for survival. But fate had already chosen its path. Slowly, the Heike began to fall. When defeat became unavoidable, tragedy followed. Warriors leaped into the sea. Mothers held their children close. Nobles chose death over capture. Among them was the young emperor himself. One by one, they vanished beneath the waves. The sea grew silent. And the age of the Heike came to an end. Yet endings are not always endings. Sometimes sorrow remains. Sometimes memory refuses to disappear. Generations passed. The battle became history. History became legend. And legend became a ghost story. People claimed they heard voices upon the water. Some saw lights drifting above the waves. Others reported hearing distant cries during stormy nights. Most dismissed such tales. But not everyone. And among those who listened carefully was Hoichi. Every night, he sang the story of the Heike. Never imagining that someone was listening in return. One humid summer night, Hoichi sat alone inside the temple. The last of the evening visitors had already gone home. The priests were asleep. Only the sound of distant waves remained. Hoichi rested his hands upon his biwa and listened to the darkness. The night felt unusually still. No insects sang. No dogs barked in the distance. Even the wind seemed reluctant to move. Then, from outside the temple gate, he heard footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Measured. Each step echoed against the stone path. Hoichi raised his head. Someone was approaching. The footsteps stopped. A deep voice emerged from the darkness. "Are you Hoichi?" The blind musician bowed politely. "Yes. I am Hoichi." The voice answered immediately. "My lord has heard of your great skill. He wishes to hear your performance. You will come with me." Hoichi hesitated. The visitor's voice carried authority. It sounded like the voice of a powerful samurai. Refusing such a request would have been disrespectful. And so Hoichi stood. He picked up his biwa. The stranger took his arm. His grip was cold. Strangely cold. Yet Hoichi said nothing. Together they left the temple grounds. Behind them, the lanterns of the temple faded into darkness. Ahead lay only silence. The man never introduced himself. nor did he explain where they were going. He simply walked. And Hoichi followed. The stone path seemed endless. Their footsteps echoed through the night. At first Hoichi could hear the sea. But eventually even the waves disappeared. The world felt distant, as though they had stepped outside ordinary reality. The air became colder. Each breath felt heavier. Hoichi listened carefully. No birds. No insects. No rustling leaves. Nothing. Only the sound of two travelers walking through darkness. And somewhere far away, a bell rang once. Then silence returned. After what felt like hours, Hoichi sensed they were approaching a large structure. The ground beneath his feet changed. Stone became smooth wood. The smell of old cedar filled the air. He heard doors sliding open. Many doors. Then came another surprise. Voices. Dozens of voices. Perhaps hundreds. Men. Women. Children. All speaking quietly, like guests gathered for a grand celebration. Hoichi could not see them, but he could feel their presence. An enormous crowd surrounded him. The mysterious guide led Hoichi forward. At last they stopped. The hall fell silent. Every voice disappeared. The stranger spoke. My lord awaits. Perform the story of Den no Wura. Hoichi bowed deeply. His fingers touched the strings of the biwa. The first note echoed through the hall. The sound traveled far. Farther than any room should allow. It was as if the music entered another world. And so Hoichi began to sing. The story of glory. The story of defeat. The story of the Heike. As Hoichi performed, something extraordinary happened. The audience listened without moving, without interrupting, without speaking. The silence felt almost sacred. Then, as he described the final moments of the battle, he heard someone crying. A woman. Then another. And another. Soon the hall was filled with quiet weeping. The listeners mourned as though they had witnessed the tragedy themselves. Hoichi's heart trembled. Never before had an audience reacted so deeply. Never before had his music touched so many people. When the performance ended, silence returned once again. Then a voice spoke. A noble voice. A powerful voice. You shall return tomorrow night. The following night, the mysterious samurai returned. As before, his footsteps arrived after darkness had settled over the temple. As before, he called Hoichi by name. And as before, Hoichi followed him without question. The journey felt familiar. The endless stone path. The cold air. The strange silence that swallowed every sound. Once again, they arrived at the Great Hall. Once again, hundreds of unseen listeners gathered. And once again, Hoichi performed. Night after night, this continued. Each evening the samurai appeared. Each evening Hoichi disappeared from the temple. Each evening he sang for the noble audience. And each evening, the audience listened with tears in their eyes. Several days passed. At first, no one noticed anything unusual. The priests assumed Hoichi was spending time alone. After all, musicians often preferred solitude. But eventually, one of the younger priests became concerned. Each morning, Hoichi appeared exhausted. Dark circles formed beneath his eyes. His voice sounded weaker. His hands trembled slightly when he played. "Are you feeling unwell?" the priest asked. Hoichi smiled politely. "No, I am quite well." Yet even as he spoke, fatigue weighed heavily upon him. Something was draining his strength. Night after night. Little by little. One evening, shortly after sunset, the head priest happened to pass near the temple gate. There he noticed something strange. Hoichi was standing outside, alone. His biwa hanging from his shoulder, as though waiting for someone. The priest watched from a distance. Minutes passed. Then Hoichi suddenly bowed. But no one stood before him. The priest narrowed his eyes. Hoichi began speaking. Yet there was nobody there. Then, to the priest's astonishment, Hoichi started walking away, following an invisible companion. The old priest felt a chill run down his spine. The next night, the priest sent 2 young monks to follow Hoichi. "Stay hidden," he warned, "and tell me where he goes." The monks obeyed. When darkness came, they watched from the shadows. Soon Hoichi appeared. And just as before, he bowed to empty air. Then he began walking. The monks followed carefully. At first. But before long, a dense fog appeared. It rolled across the path without warning. The air became cold. The darkness thickened. And then, Hoichi vanished. The monks searched desperately. Yet there was no sign of him. It was as if he had disappeared into another world. The following evening, the priest decided to investigate personally. This time he followed Hoichi himself. The old monk moved silently through the darkness, keeping a careful distance. Again, Hoichi left the temple. Again, he appeared to walk beside an invisible guide. The priest continued following. past the trees, past the stone paths, toward the shoreline. Then he stopped. Before him stood a cemetery. Ancient graves covered in moss. Weathered stone monuments. And beyond them, the sea. There was no palace. No mansion. No noble residence. Only graves. The priest hid behind a stone monument and stared in disbelief. Moonlight illuminated the cemetery. And there, seated among the graves, was Hoichi, playing his biwa, singing with all his heart. Yet there was no audience, no nobles, no lord, only rows of silent tombstones. Then the priest noticed something else. A faint blue light. Another. And another. Soon hundreds of pale lights appeared throughout the cemetery. The old monk's blood ran cold. At last he understood. Hoichi had not been performing for the living. Night after night, he had been singing for the dead. The priest remained hidden among the graves. For a long moment, he could do nothing but watch. Hoichi continued to play. His voice carried across the cemetery. The pale lights drifted silently between the tombstones. Some hovered above the ground. Others moved like distant lanterns upon the sea. The old priest lowered his head. At last, the truth became clear. The spirits of the Heike had returned. Drawn by Hoichi's music. Drawn by the sorrowful tale of their final battle. And each night, they gathered to listen. But the priest knew such gatherings could not continue. The dead belonged to the world beyond. If Hoichi remained among them much longer, they would eventually claim him as one of their own. The priest hurried back to the temple. There was little time left. Before dawn, the priest gathered the other monks. Together they discussed what must be done. At first, no one spoke. The situation seemed impossible. How could ordinary men protect Hoichi from spirits that had wandered the earth for centuries? Finally, the oldest monk offered an answer. There is only one way. We must hide him. Not behind walls. Not behind doors. But from the eyes of the dead themselves. The monks prepared brushes. They prepared ink. And they prepared sacred sutras. Ancient words believed to carry the protection of the Buddha. If the entire body of Hoichi could be covered with those holy writings, the spirits would no longer be able to see him. As evening approached, Hoichi sat quietly inside the temple. He listened while the monks explained the truth. At first, He could hardly believe it. The grand hall, the noble audience, the powerful lord, all of them had been ghosts. The realization filled him with fear. Yet there was no time for fear. The ritual began. One by one, the monks painted sacred words across his skin, across his arms, across his chest, across his back, across his face. The brush moved slowly beneath candlelight. Hours passed. By the end of the ritual, Hoichi's entire body was covered in black characters. The priest gave one final instruction. No matter what happens tonight, remain silent. Do not move. Do not answer any voice. Night fell. The temple became silent. Hoichi sat alone in the darkness. He could hear his own breathing. Nothing else. Then, at last, the footsteps returned. Slow. Heavy. Measured. The same footsteps he had heard before. They crossed the temple grounds. They stopped outside. The samurai had come. A familiar voice called out. Hoichi. No answer. Again the voice called. Hoichi. Still, Hoichi remained silent. The samurai entered the temple. The spirit searched the room, but he could see nothing. For where Hoichi sat, there appeared to be only empty space. The sacred sutras were working. Yet neither Hoichi nor the monks realized one terrible mistake had been made. The spirit searched again. And then he found them. 2 ears. Floating in darkness. Nothing else. Only ears. The samurai stood silently for a moment. Then he spoke. My lord commanded that Hoichi appear tonight. If only his ears remain, then his ears shall be taken. Hoichi trembled. Every instinct begged him to move, to run, to cry out. Yet he remembered the priest's warning. He remained silent. The spirit reached forward. A sharp pain exploded through Hoichi's head. But he did not scream. He did not move. Moments later, the footsteps retreated into the darkness. And the spirit was gone. When dawn arrived, the monks rushed into the room. They found Hoichi alive. Weak. Pale. But alive. Only then did they discover their mistake. In their haste, they had forgotten to write the sacred sutras upon his ears. The spirits had seen the only part of him left uncovered. From that day forward, Hoichi became known throughout the land. People traveled great distances to hear the story of the blind musician who survived the dead. And because he lost his ears on that terrible night, they gave him a new name. Hoichi the Earless. Years passed. The Battle of Den no Wura faded further into history. Yet some say that on quiet nights, when the sea grows calm and the wind falls silent, the spirits of the haiku still gather beneath the waves. Listening. Waiting. Remembering. And somewhere beyond the reach of the living world, they still hear the music of Hoichi.
The story ends here, but some mysteries never fade. Subscribe to Mystic Archive Japan and join us again in the next story. Good night.